Progress.
Okay. So, um, like I said in the last lecture, I'm just going to record this one, post it today. That way you have access to both on a day like today. So, this lecture is about delivery. Okay. So, we got our speech written. We are ready to present it, but now we're sort of thinking about how do we actually give it. So, and then some tips to remember. So, the attendance question for today is, if you could have any superpower, what would it be? And there's a lot of different examples here. Let me pull it up here. So, force fields, magnetism. Some of these aren't really like superpowers, like attractive female, attractive male, insanely rich. These are all things that I think, wouldn't really qualify as superpowers, but I found this online under this little link here. It's where it says source. So you can click on this and it'll bring you right to the same thing. If I could pick anything on here, I would probably pick teleport, just because I think that's the most practical in terms of I don't have to drive anywhere anymore. I could go anywhere around the world if I wanted to, and then, come right back home. So yeah, I think that would be pretty cool. And I know a lot of these are just sort of based on people who already have abilities like Power Suit, that's clearly a reference to Iron Man, or Weapon Master. I'm pretty sure that's Deadeye. Um, from Suicide Squad. But anywho, um, I just sort of wanted you to think about that. But no way of answering that, obviously. But if you wanted to tell me on Tuesday, you can tell me. So the agenda for today, we're going to talk about nonverbal communication very briefly because not all communication that happens is specifically talking, verbal communication. There's a lot of stuff we do with our bodies we don't even realize. There are four different methods of delivery I want you to think about, and I'll go over each one of these in depth. But the one I want you to pay the most attention to is the last one here, number four, extemporaneous. And I'll go in more in depth with what that method is. Your speaking voice, there are a lot of different qualities to it that I want you to think about. Your body when speaking, what do you do with your body when you're speaking? I actually had a vocal lesson the other day. It was free, and it happened at this place called the School of Rock, mostly geared towards musicians. But one thing that they emphasize is using your diaphragm. It's a sort of a muscle. Some of you may know this already, but it's a muscle right below your lungs that you can sort of imagine pushing out on your stomach when you talk, and that'll sort of help you enunciate and be more clear when you talk. So practicing delivery. So what can you do to make sure that when you do give your speech that it's well polished, it's rehearsed, and all of those things? And then we'll talk about next class. But nonverbal communication, very simple. It's just everything that isn't just talking. Every gesture that you have, the clothes that you wear, even, that's sort of a way to non-verbally communicate to people what your deal is. Um, yeah, not really much to talk about here. Just know that communication isn't all in the realm of talking. So, four different methods of delivery. Like I said, there's manuscript, memory, impromptu, and extemporaneous. The last one being the most important one I want you to think about. Now, a manuscript, it's fully written out and it is read to the audience. Now, this can be a little jarring because you're not making eye contact as much as you would in another type of speech. But that's where, if you were giving a manuscript speech, you would want to make sure that you're actually making eye contact with your audience. You're not just looking down the whole time and just not saying anything or not looking up when you talk. So, memory, there is no manuscript, there is no notes, there is no outline. Everything is memorized as it is written down. Sorry if you can hear the rain. But I wanted to make sure I had a nice background here and that I wasn't also too close to the street. So, Lily, you might know this, obviously, being in theater, that is where memory comes in hand. You don't have your script on stage when you're actually doing the actual dress rehearsal or when you're doing the actual production itself. So that's why I want you to not think about this as being completely memorized speech. Impromptu speaking, you're not really given a lot of preparation for this. You just sort of have to go for it. And we did this on the days when I asked you questions like, if you were an animal, what could you be? Or what's your favorite season? Give me three reasons why. So it is another type of public speaking, but it's not the type of public speaking we do for our speeches. Finally, this is the one that I want you to think about when we're giving our speeches. It's prepared and it's rehearsed, and you do have some notes that you can speak from. But the thing you need to remember about extemporaneous speaking is conversational quality. it sounds spontaneous no matter how many times you've rehearsed it. Okay. It's not like you're saying it the same way you would say it every other time, right? It would be slightly different, but pretty much the same because you're all referencing the same material, right? If you were in a theater show, you want to make sure that when you give this line, when you deliver it, that it's the way that it should be delivered every single time that you would give this show, and that you're not improvising. Okay. So that's the thing I want you to think about is extemporaneous speaking. It's spontaneous and it's conversational. It doesn't sound rehearsed. You're still making eye contact. You're still using your body and your gestures, and you have brief notes. You're not sitting there and you're just reading it off to the audience. So your voice, very powerful stuff. You may not realize this, but there are a lot of different qualities you can have. Volume, pitch, rate, pauses and vocal fillers, vocal variety, pronunciation, articulation, and dialect. And I actually have a little funny example for you when we talk about dialect. But volume, very simply, is just how loud or how soft you talk. I have a tendency to be a pretty loud speaker, but I want to make sure that people hear me, that I'm projecting well enough, and that I'm understood. Because have you ever heard, like, not fully understood what somebody has said because they just weren't talking loudly enough? So make sure that when you give your speech, and that's why I even have those little those little cards that say louder, because I want you to be able to make sure that everybody, even the people in the back of the room, can hear you. And then next we have pitch. This is just, is it a high pitch? Is it a low pitch? Um, there's this thing that happens when you're asking a question. I can't remember the specific term off the top of my head, but when you are finished talking, you want to make sure, oh, inflection, that's the word. A downward inflection is what you want to try to have when you finish speaking. See, what I did there is I stopped talking on a lower pitch. I went down. And that's sort of the way you can indicate to somebody that you're done talking, as opposed to if you give upward inflection at the end of your sentences, it makes you sound uncertain. It makes you sound like you don't know what you're talking about, and that can undermine your credibility as a speaker. So that's something I want you to think about as pitch in terms of, do you end your sentences like this? Or do you end your sentences like this? Hopefully you can see or not see, hear the difference there in terms of pitch. Rate, how quickly are you talking? That's why I have that other sign there that says slower, because some people have a tendency to talk pretty quickly. And I might be somebody who also suffers from that problem where I happen to talk a little bit too fast, right? That's just something you want to think about, because when you talk too fast, people don't understand you as if you were talking plainly, as if you were talking calmly, because if you're talking too quickly, it sort of tells the audience that you're not comfortable up there. And that's okay. It is fine that we're not completely comfortable when we're on the stage. It's natural because everybody's paying attention to us. It's a discomforting feeling. But we want to make sure that we're still being understood well and that people aren't tuning out because they're talking too fast. I can't understand what's happening. And I'm not comfortable because they're not comfortable, right? There's another term, it's called emotional contagion, right? Coming back from COVID, we should all be familiar with the term contagion, but let me describe it for you. It's just, can you feel what the other person is feeling, right? If I'm talking too quickly, I might seem uncertain, I might seem anxious, and that might make you, the audience member, feel anxious as well. So that's just something to think about. Try to make sure that when you're talking, you're not talking too quickly. Pauses. It's a break in vocal delivery, and this can be used to some serious advantage when you give a speech. If you're giving somebody a hypothetical situation, right? Imagine you're on the beach. You give them a moment, pause, let them think about it for a minute instead of imagine you're on the beach. There's your umbrella, there's your beach towel, the waves are crashing down, Instead of overwhelming them, you can sort of give them a moment. And another thing is that you can utilize these pauses effectively and strategically to avoid vocalized pauses, otherwise known as filler words. That is sort of an example right there where instead of saying you can just stop talking. And I know that seems sort of crazy, like, aren't I supposed to be talking the whole time? Isn't that the point? But it detracts from your speech because it makes you sound uncertain. It makes you seem uncomfortable, right? And like I was saying, that can make the audience feel uncomfortable because you want to make sure that when you're up there, you're confident, you know what you're talking about. Okay? So, vocal variety. These are the changes in rate, pitch, volume, and they help give your voice a little bit more expressiveness. All right. It's not like, and I should have brought up the Ben Stein example from Ferris Bueller's Day Off when he says, the Smoot Tariff Act. Anyone? Anyone? There's no vocal variety in when he's talking, and you can see because it shows the faces of the students, they're all very bored. One of them is falling asleep, because there's no variety in when they're talking. So, vocal variety is something you can use to sort of think about how can I keep my audience interested and not just keep talking the same way every single word. All right, pronunciation. It's a standard, When we give a certain pronunciation of words, we want to make sure that it's the right way to pronounce it. I've been watching this YouTuber recently. His name is Flygon HG, and he does Pokemon Nuzlocke challenges. And I know you're probably thinking like, what is he talking about right now? But there are certain Pokemon that he'll bring out that he mispronounces on purpose, I guess for the sake of keeping the audience interested. There's a Pokemon called Arcanine that he pronounces Arcanine. So why is pronunciation important? Because your audience can sort of get hung up on the fact that you mispronounce a certain word, right? Um, they just sort of can't really pay attention to what you're saying after the fact because of that one single slip up where, well, if you didn't pronounce that or she didn't pronounce that word right, then how am I going to keep paying attention to the rest of the speech? Because all I can think about is how they mispronounce that one word. So it's okay because I know a lot of you are going to have sources for this speech and then the next speech after that. Don't worry about perfectly pronouncing the person's last name. Okay. It's okay. That person isn't in the room to judge you. I'm not going to judge. Well, I have to grade you, so I'm going to judge you, but I'm not going to knock you points because you don't know how to pronounce somebody's name. That's totally fine. Right. I think before I move on, I think the most important thing is that you just sort of have the confidence when you give their last name. You're not like, I'm not sure how to pronounce this last name, but, and then you try to pronounce it. Just give it your best shot, and then you are saving time to actually give your speech instead of wasting time trying to like explain to the audience how I don't know how to pronounce this. Well, we probably don't know how to pronounce it either. So don't worry too much about pronunciation in terms of authors' last names, things like that. Just try your best. Articulation, okay? The production of speech sounds. You want to make sure that you're not just murmuring and that you're not speaking too quickly and just sort of all your words are phasing together like this. Take your time to articulate each individual word because if I can't understand you, odds are the audience can't understand you either. And then what is the point of your speech right now? If nobody can understand what you're saying, it kind of detracts, and then people can't really pay attention as effectively as if you were articulating every single word. Okay. You're not up there auctioneering, you're not one of those people, can I get 5? Can I get 6? Take your time. Okay. I know there's a time limit for this, but it's a pretty good buffer. Excuse me. All right. Dialect. So how can we sort of think about dialect? This is what makes language such a diverse thing. In America, we have a lot of different dialects. People on the West Coast, people on the East Coast, people who live in Minnesota. There's people who live in Florida. There's people who live down in Cajun country, in the Bayou, in Louisiana. There's a lot of different, or just the southern area in general. All right. We can sort of think about this in terms of how people are speaking the same language, but it sounds different because of their dialect. And I don't want you to just think about it in terms of just being the USA, right? Even in places like China, there are different dialects and even variations on the language. Cantonese is a certain version of Chinese, but it's different. Just like Taiwanese, sort of like Chinese, but it's different because of the dialect, all the stuff that goes with it. There are a couple factors. Number one is accent, okay? Southern, Northern, what have you. Grammar, all right? Are they sort of using words that sort of blend together, or are they using words that stand individually on their own? And then finally, we have vocabulary. It might be certain words they're using that we are completely unfamiliar with, right? Like, I'm going to just use this word gyat, okay? Gyat. It's just sort of a word that isn't used in the mainstream. It's sort of used on the internet to refer to something in particular, but Yeet, another example of you need to know what that word means. So try to avoid using those words unless you're breaking down the word, right? Then you have to use that word. But let me give you an example on dialect. So this is from Little Bubby Child on YouTube. And even right here, rapid far foolishness. It's not rapid far, it's rapid fire. Okay. But they use the word far because that is how they would use it in terms of their dialect. So let me play this little video for you.
Doctor said I wouldn't last a year living on biscuits and jam, but here I am, opening my own apple butter business, and he's the one deader than a doornail from that drunk driver.
Honey, I quit answering the door in 1987, and I won't even go to the bank without a pistol, or the very least a good solid mag light.
My son Boyd ate at one of them alternative healthy restaurants. Been sicker than hell. I said, son, what'd you expect? You gonna lay down with dogs, you gonna get up with fleas?
Buddy, you can have your fancy European paper straws. You know why? Because when somebody digs me up in a million years, that U.S. plastic's going to be as good as a day is made, honey. And that there is craftsmanship.
So I hope that you could pick up on some of those examples that were alluded to on the previous slide. Sort of what grammar are they using? You know, you can tell they have a Southern accent, and then the vocabulary that they're using, the word maglite. Okay, a maglight's a flashlight, right? But they use a specific type of vocabulary, and that's something to be considered. So I hope you enjoyed that little example there. I did. That's why I put it in there for you. Okay. Your body, okay? Personal appearance does play a factor. I remember on one of the very first days, it was Maddie who asked me, like, do we have to dress up for our speech? You don't have to, but it does sort of say something about you that you can't say in words, okay? Imagine if I was just wearing a hoodie right now. You know, you can't see what I do have pants on, I promise. But when I show up to class, I try to give an appearance of professionalism, okay? Because I'm the teacher, I got to be professional, you know? I don't just show up in sweatpants and a hoodie like I would if I were going over to my dad's house, you know, to have dinner with him. I'm a lot more comfortable there, and I wouldn't show up wearing this. Movement. When you talk, there's something you want to try to avoid, which is pacing, okay? Moving back and forth and back and forth. A little bit of movement is okay, or like if I was sitting here and I was just doing this back and forth. I remember one of my first classes that I taught for Intro to Public Speaking. It was during COVID, so they had to be giving their speeches in this format, right? He was in a one of those office chairs, you know, the ones that, you know, it's on the wheels. When he was giving his speech, he just kept doing this. He just kept back and forth, and I couldn't pay attention to his speech because I was distracted by his movement, and that's really no different than if you were in front of the classroom and you're just going from wall to wall, walking back and forth and back and forth. It gives the impression that you're nervous, that you're anxious, okay? And like I said before, public speaking is unnatural, all right? It's not something that we're inherently comfortable with, but we have to think about the audience, because if we give the impression that we're uncomfortable or that we're anxious, it's going to affect the audience, right? So movement, make sure that you're mostly limiting it to your hands, your gesture, your upper body here, right? I even have to go a step further when I gesture when I'm lecturing in this format, because I can't move around, okay? I have to use my hands more. Gestures, that leads on to the next thing. Use your hands, right? And I know some of us might have note cards and things like that, but if we're getting a graph, we wouldn't just, you know, sit here and say, okay, here we have a graph, and then just sort of look at it and talk about it, and then just go back to our notes and then move on with the speech. Point at it, reference it, gesture to it, you know? Use your hands. Eye contact. Probably one of the most underrated thing out of all the things on this slide here. It is so important for you to actually connect with your audience and look at them, right? When I'm talking right now, I'm looking right into the webcam. I'm not trying to just, you know, look around because it looks like I'm distracted and I'm not really paying attention to what I'm doing here. It just sort of what's the word I'm looking for? You're detached from your speech. If you just sit here and read it off to your audience, it's like they're not even there, right? So make a connection and scan the room. Don't just stare at one person in particular, right? Try to move from one person all the way across the room. Try to look at every single person when you give your speech, right? It makes the audience feel seen, and that's important because, you know, otherwise you're just sort of detached, like I said. Okay. Kinesics. It's the study of motions as a mode of communication. Not really a whole lot we need to talk about here. Just like I said earlier when I talked about movement, Excessive movement makes you seem nervous and anxious, so try to avoid that, okay? A little bit is okay, but that's just all I really have to say about this. When you practice your delivery, go through your preparation outline aloud, okay? It's important because you might type something and it sounds fine, but when you read it out loud, you'd be like, that doesn't really necessarily sound right. How can I fix that? That's why you want to say it out loud, because you're going to have to give this speech in front of all of us. It's important you start with this step. Number two, prepare your speaking outline. Again, not your preparation outline, which is the complete sentences, all that sort of stuff with the periods, the subpoints, written in its entirety. The speaking outline is the shorthand version of that stuff, okay? And then practice your speech aloud. So not just your preparation outline, but the actual speech itself. How would you give it in this particular situation? How would you gesture? Would you throw in a pause here, you know? Would you point to your graph, referencing your visual aid? Those are things to think about when practicing your delivery. Polish and refine. We all have different public speaking abilities, okay? I have a decade on you guys, all right? And I'm not saying that to brag. I'm not saying I'm better than you. But some people need more practice than others. When people ask me, how many times should I practice this speech? I say, until you feel comfortable delivering it, you know? Because some people don't need to practice a lot. Some people do need to practice a lot. You need to know where you stand, because I can't say for you, right? But it is important that you practice. You can't just go up there without having practice and expect you to do well, because you need to make sure that you know what you're going to be doing. And then give a dress rehearsal. Again, I'm going to call back to Lily because she's done theater before. What is a dress rehearsal? And if Lily were in the classroom, I'd just ask her to, you know, tell you guys what it is. But a dress rehearsal is sort of, before you've officially given the production, you're acting as if you are giving the production, right? Everything is the way it should be, as if you were giving the actual show. So a dress rehearsal, pretend you're in front of that you're in front of all of us, you know, pretend you're in the front of the room and you're about to give your speech, give a dress rehearsal. Something I've heard is if you have stuffed animals, you can pretend that they're the audience. You know, you can try practicing eye contact, using your notes, still maintaining eye contact. Those are things to keep in mind, because or in the mirror, right? I know that seems a little weird to practice in the mirror, but that's something that could be really helpful, because you need to know, am I making eye contact? What do I look like when I'm giving my speech? Okay? So those are all things you can do when you're practicing your delivery. Go through that preparation outline, prepare that outline, the speaking outline, practice, refine, and then give a dress rehearsal. Pretend like it's the day of your speech and you're giving it in front of us all. Okay? Now, next class, next Tuesday, in a week from now, that's the informative speech prep day. I'm going to give you 2 days to prepare for this speech, because it's informative speech prep day on the 12th, and then we have class again on the 14th. And then the very first speech is the following Tuesdays and Thursdays. So from now, you could be speaking in 2 weeks, you could be speaking in 2.5 weeks. Please show up to class on Tuesday with something. If you show up with nothing, I can't help you, okay? I can't give you feedback and tell you, here's how you can make this speech better. Because you can bring me the feedback again on Thursday, you know? You bring something on Tuesday, I tell you what to fix. You come on Thursday with what's fixed, and then I can give you another round of feedback, making your speech even better. All right? So, that's all I really got for you for this chapter on delivery. It was supposed to take 2 days, but it didn't take 2 days. So, we're going to have 2 preparation days for the informative speech. All right? Bring your outlines, bring your bibliography, right? All your sources and everything like that, your works cited. And that's it. That's all I got for this lecture here. So thank you all for bearing with me through this awkward process of me talking to the computer and then you watching it after the fact. But I am deeply grateful for your attentiveness, and I look forward to seeing you in class on Tuesday. See you later.